Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Alvin Foo has joined me in the studio today. Alvin, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Andrew. Love to be on your show. I've seen some of your past production before. Lovely. Looking forward to the show and looking forward to this interesting discussion.
Super, me too. Now, our audience knows that the first question we always ask all our guests is just to introduce yourself to them, a little bit about yourself and where your current focus is.
Well, how much time do we have? Well, I'm a venture capital. I focus on investing into Web3 companies. And basically, these are, I would say, decentralized blockchain companies. And I've been doing this stuff for the last 4 years full time. And prior to that, I've been running multinationals in China and also been around Asia Pacific for the last at least 7 years in the tech space around Asia.
Super. And every single guest that I ask that question to always presents their professional self, which is absolutely the right thing to do. But when you need to switch off and do something other than think about work or investing or whatever, what is it that takes you away to your happy place? What is it you do?
Well, happy place is when I'm with my family.
Yeah.
I think family is my main driver. If you ask me, I think it's the main driver that really, keeps me going. My kids, my wife, and they keep me, they have been keeping me in check, making sure that I'm always on the right direction. And even there are times that I have fallen out of the track. They continue to keep me in check. And of course, my parents and so forth. Family is really my main driver. Of course, I still have my spare time that I spend a lot of my time reading, and that could also be playing badminton and also of late pickleball. So it all these continues to continue to push me, and as I continue to age, and getting older and all that stuff, things that I don't care very much in the past, like health, right now stop popping up in the sense that I spend a lot of great deal of time researching and investing into longevity science, right? So these are things that keep me they've been keeping me going. And work aside, I've done, my career stretch from 1993, so almost more than 30 years in been working, and also there's been a lot of challenges. There have been a lot of ups and downs, and more failures than success in that sense, because you're probably going to, I wouldn't use the word failure, right? It's basically learning, right? Learning that continue, and then you keep on learning. I'm still learning up until this point. I've never dared to say that I'm an expert in anything, right? Because there's so much to learn, right? And whatever you learn, and immediately becomes obsolete. And that has always been the case for me. That's why I always coin out the idea of most very important to staying relevant is to learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? And that's the only way. At least from my perspective, right, is the one attitude that one needs to have, right, to continue to stay relevant. And the ability of being able to stay relevant is also anti-aging, because as you continue to learn, you don't feel you're aging because you're always at the forefront. And that's why a lot of people ask me, Alvin, why are you still in technology? And I said, I like to be in technology because it makes me feel young. It makes me feel alive, right? And it's great to see what's going on. And of course, the speed gets faster and faster, and then catching up becomes harder and harder, right? So you need to be very selective of areas that you care about and that you really want to learn, and really zoom in and make the best out of it. And I think the only way to stay young, beside keeping fit, right, is really not just to exercise physically, but to also train your mind physically and mentally. That will definitely help you to stay very young for a long time.
I love that. And I'm only 4 years ahead of you. I joined the workforce in 1989. So there's going to be lots of things I think I hear from you today that I can relate to. But what I would like you to do today, Alvin, because you are well read and I love reading as well, is as you're telling us about your experiences, if anything comes to mind that is supported through reading or it changed your life or had a different perspective or gave you a different lens, feel free to share that. The audience always loves those references to various literature. So let's take you straight back to your childhood. That's where we tend to start these journeys because they are very formative years for us in terms of what shapes us. We've got nature and obviously nurture shaping us as leaders. So tell us about your childhood and what those key moments were.
I mean, I came from a very humble beginning. My dad was an orphan, right? So seeing him growing up and listening to his stories has always been not only just inspiring, but also my dad is probably one of my biggest supporter and also someone that mentors me a lot. Coming from a childhood that was nothing great, yeah, because he didn't have parents. The father actually, my grandparents actually, my granddad actually passed away even before my dad was born. So he had a rough life, rough. But also, it could also be because of that rough life that molded him, right, to be what it is he is today, right? And I learned a lot from him. And he's very tough on me, very tough. And also because, as I've said right earlier, because of his background. So being Chinese family in Malaysia, rough, and he continued to be very strict and making sure that I'm always on the right track. So in those days, it was like, it's either his way or the highway. So a lot of my childhood was really molded by my father, that he set a direction, that he thinks that I should be doing, law, I should become a lawyer and so forth. And he shaped me in that way that he thinks is right. And I followed because I have, my fullest confidence in him. And my mom is, just a housewife, full-time housewife that provided the care and need at home. But my dad is the one that really helped me to set my direction. And whether that's right or wrong direction, but he somehow puts in a direction for me to follow. And my childhood has always been, whatever my dad says. So a lot of grooming was done by him. I owe a lot of my upbringing, my experience and so forth from my dad. Yeah, I went through, humble beginning. My family was very average family. What shaped me in the sense that my dad always told me that because we came from a very humble beginning, my objective in life is to make sure that I put you to school, because he didn't even finish. I think he only finished like his O level or less, right? And my dad ambition was like to put all his children, including my brothers, right, to university, and hopefully that you guys will do well in your life. So his ambition was really to see me graduate, right? And beyond that, right, he hoped that me and my brother will become very successful. And my entire life was really focused on a lot of the time really on education. And to be candid, I don't really enjoy it. As much as I need to deliver my result and so forth, that I don't enjoy. I've I've spent a great deal of my time in when I was in school, right? Playing more than anything else, created more problems than anything else for my dad, right? That my teachers have invited my dad to school several times, several occasions, just to complain about me, right? And I've always been, a very mischievous student, right? And sometimes problematic. Imagine that my dad has actually gone, visited my school several times because problems I created. And also not because I'm a lousy kid or I'm a bad kid, just I just happen to be mischievous that I want to try everything and anything possible. But it was good that I had a very strict dad, in a sense that he continued to make sure that that I stay on the right track, right? Whether that's going to be through physical caning or whatever that may be when I was younger. But truly, what he has done shaped me in a very positive way. I may not agree with everything that he has done previously, but certainly, if you look at, if I were to look back, right, majority time occasion, I think the discipline and so forth, right, has been rewarding, right? And I think I owe it to my.
Can I ask you a question there, Alvin? It's really interesting that you share that with us. I'm interested in, even though you grew up in that environment and he had the direction in mind for you, and you obviously respect him for that. Can you remember back then in that childhood around your brothers as well, Did you ever have a dream at that point? Did you think about what it was you wanted to do with your life, or was it totally railroaded in that sense by your father?
When I was young, I always wanted to become a doctor.
Ah,
I have I have no idea why I even have that ambition, but maybe because when I was young, right, I tend to watch a lot of TV, right, and there were some series that talks about becoming a doctor and so forth. So for several years, from at least from elementary school all the way to secondary school, that I have an aspiration, I have an ambition that I want to become a doctor. But my dad was the one who sway and encouraged me and said, you should become a lawyer because you somehow your characteristic and becoming a doctor is a mismatch. That he actually convinced me, well, convinced in a very forceful way, that I ended up doing law. But I have this aspiration. I mean, I always had that I wanted to become a doctor. That has kind of like motivated me to do very well in my at least in my major exam, right? But at the end of the day, I actually switched from a science stream and end up doing law in London. So my dad, you could probably you can start to feel that my dad has a lot of influence on me, right?
and I'm just now thinking Dr. Alvin Foo actually has got a nice round sort of ring to it. I can't quite like the sound of that, but well,
Would have been quite nice.
yeah, it would be, yeah. So for this particular podcast, Alvin, what I think we might do, if it's okay with you, because you've got lots of stories to tell as well about the ups and downs, is why don't we maybe split it into decades? You mentioned that you started that work journey in 1993, and obviously since then you're into your fourth decade now in terms of work. So maybe take us first to the first 10 years as you got into the workplace, bearing in mind the way that you'd gone into that sort of legal qualifications and then your father, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. My journey, well, I actually completed my law degree, And in fact, I even did my internship and so forth. And it was actually during my internship that I realized that becoming a lawyer is really not me. It's really not for me. I actually kind of like decided at that point that it's really not for me. But I have no clue what I wanted to do in my life. Seriously, I have no clue whatsoever. The only thing that I had in mind was I wanted to do something different. I want to be in business, but I have no clue whatsoever, which area and what I want. But I do have a dream at that time. I should go and embark on to do something new, and that new, I have no clue what it is really. And immediately after the internship, that I decided I want to do something else. Right, I actually went into business. I went into a trading business, and of course, that was my first business. And the end result was pretty predictable. I didn't do very well and I failed. And 9 months after that, right, I said, it's probably not the right time and probably not the right trade. And what happened after that? I actually went back to work, and it was no, but the period of failing and going back to work, right? I'll share with you. I actually went through a depression. Really, I actually went through a depression. It was probably one of the most depressing moment of my life because I've never failed. I've never failed. In my entire life being in school, I've done very well. And I thought after graduation, right, I thought I'll be at the top of the world. How can I fail? I've never failed. And that first failure was a real failure. It really smacked it, in my face that I said, shit, I'm not good enough. And I actually got so depressed that I stayed in my room. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to meet anybody. I was at that time maybe 20, just slightly over 22 years old, just right after graduation. And I didn't want to see anyone because I felt like such a failure. Like my dad sent me to finish my college, and I came back and I failed. And to me, it was like something, is a big no, right? And even though that my dad was talking to me and everyone else was talking to me, trying to encourage me, I was still very depressed. I was depressed almost for at least 2 months. 2 months. And it took me quite a bit of time. Now, somehow at the end of the day, time will heal.
Sure.
Time will heal. And I think I owe a lot of that healing to my dad. And eventually he said, you gotta get back to work, man. You can't do this shit, staying at home and doing nothing, right? And I didn't know what to do. And my dad said, why don't you go back and do law and become a lawyer? I said, that's not what I want. That's not what I decided from day one, I didn't want to practice anymore. So my dad said, why don't I introduce you some friends, right? Some of my friends who are some very enterprising friends of mine. And maybe through talking to them, that will give you some kind of inspiration, which I did. And I talked to one gentleman, a very good friend who eventually become a mentor of mine. Yeah, a very young guy who actually ran an advertising company, traditional advertising, not the digital ad. This was still the traditional advertising, the radio and so forth. And I talked to him, and what the spark was this. Yeah, seeing a young man, and he said one thing that I always remember. He said, son, uh, now if you go and work for a bank, you're not going to be able to own or even start a bank very quickly, right? But if you were to do advertising, that's something that you can learn, and that you can eventually start your own advertising company at some point. So that was the same reason why David, and his name is David. David actually went into advertising, working for someone else, and eventually 2 years down the road, he started his own advertising practice, which became very successful. And I actually ended up working for him. And at the back of my mind, said, I'm not going to go into business. I failed already. Why am I bother doing business? I said, shit, I'm not going to do business. I'm just going to work for someone else, and probably just working for someone else is my best solution because I don't need to fail. I get my paycheck at the end of the month. And that was what I was telling my mind. My mind was telling myself. And eventually what happened was I actually worked for him for under a year. I think maybe like 10 months. That somehow that inspiration. So again, I think maybe being in enterprising and doing something out on my own has always been in my DNA, right? I was built that way. I've seen how my dad, and friends been very enterprising in a very young age. And 10 months down the road, right, I've decided, I should get back into business again. So I restarted again. So a year down the road, I actually restarted, and I actually built my first advertising company. Again, traditional advertising. This was like maybe in 95. So I got back into the business, and I restarted the entire journey again. And this time a bit smarter, because you have experienced failure, and that's learning. So it was because of the second business, a second experience, that I started to look back and said, any failure is actually learning. It's just it's just how you look at it, right? And being able to crawl my way out from the rabbit hole and start all over again, I think it's a miracle. And I started my own advertising company again back in '95, and it became a very successful concern because within a year, I went from like 2 people to 30 people. Wow. Right, and from zero revenue to like $10 million in the first year. And I was like only 24 years old. I was like, oh, again, I'm on top of the world. Advertising business is a very cruel business because it's a business that's not scalable. It's very easy to win business, but it's very hard to keep your business because there's always competition, and you have to constantly pitch for new business. Because if you don't pitch for new business, right, you're going to run out of business because the old business is going to move all the time. And that's the way advertising works. And after a year of running the business, I started to realize, I said, this is not a good business. I said, anything that is not scalable. So that was when I learned I need to do something that's scalable. So in '95, I actually learned that I will not do any business that's not easily scalable. And that was a big learning, right? And what happened in '95, '96 was internet was just creeping into most countries. And before that, to me, computer is like an advanced typewriter. Yeah. So even in uni, I was like using my laptop like an advanced typewriter when I was doing my thesis and so forth, right? It wasn't really a computer. It was just an advanced typewriter. So I have very little knowledge of computer, and all I had at the time, not my knowledge was, to switch on the computer and to load it up. And then to me, when I saw the glimpse of internet at that time, completely changed my entire, perspective. And what really drove me looking into the business is I read one book. And this book was actually given to me by my good buddy, Kenneth. So Kenneth, my good buddy from school, actually gave me a book not sure whether he read it, but he said, Alvin, I think because you're looking into the space. So the name of the book is The Road Ahead by Bill Gates. So to me, it was like, I mean, before that, I heard of Bill Gates, but I have no idea what this, I only knew Microsoft, right? And reading that book that was actually written by Bill Gates that talks about the information superhighway. That term was coined by Bill in those days, right? Information superhighway, and potentially how that would game change everything. Like, to me, it was like, sci-fi. But after playing around with internet using a NASK modem, if you can still recall how slow that was, but to me at that time, being able to load Yahoo.com, Amazon.com was like, wow. It was like, it's unbelievable, right? So seeing that, I told myself, I need to get into this space, but I have no clue how. Because to me, as I've said earlier, computer was really advanced typewriter. So I need to pick an area. And I have no idea because I don't know coding. Never worked in an IT company. I don't know what in the world is networking. And my best bet was, the only talent that I had was to connect my laptop and my computer to the internet. And I was like, wow. And so I researched, right? And was trying to figure out and what I did was I started to play whatever that's possible on the internet. I actually literally tried every application possible because I was just trying to explore, where are the opportunity? And when I look at Amazon, I said, how do I get into the space, right? And of course, the term e-commerce wasn't even there yet, right? And as I was playing, I actually played a product called Freetel. And this is like the first application that is actually like Skype. Think of Skype like version 1, like very early days. And so Freetel in 1997 allows you to make type messaging. And then what happened after version 2 came out, right? It has a voice. It has a voice application that allows you to call someone. And most of the calls are just random calls. You can just random call anybody. And I actually called some people in the US and all over the world. And I actually spoke on that using that application. But it was really, really early days that every single call comes with a lot of delay. Like, hello. Like, you need to wait like 3 seconds. But the thing is this, that gave me an inspiration. I said, you can actually push call through the internet, right? I mean, to cut the story short, so that was actually what gave me the first inspiration to start a voice over IP company. So I actually went on, and started the first. I think this is probably the first voice over IP company in Asia, and probably like 5 in the world. Seriously. This was in 97, 98. And someone with no background in networking and whatsoever, right? And I started to, pick up networking book and started to learn what the hell is TCP/IP, cream cable and all that stuff. And also young. I was hungry. I was trying to learn. And I think it's all about hungry, passionate, and really. And I kept spending, I think on an average, I was like spending, at least 14, 16 hours a day. So the thing is that if you're really passionate about what you do, right, and if you're really hungry enough, you do it. And I did, right? And I started the first company, and that business was my inroad into the tech business. And then I had the founders, and then I raised money, and then that company became very sizable and became very successful eventually. So I mean, to shorten it down, when I look back, right, I had no knowledge if I look back in the last 30 years, whatever that I've done in my 30 years, I have no knowledge. I have no knowledge in AI. I have no clue what was blockchain maybe 9 years ago. So a lot of things that I have no, but the thing is that if you're willing to learn, the concept I was just saying, learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? If you practice that, and I've been practicing that for a long time. And that was probably my recipe of learning new stuff. I just have the ability to capture it very quickly, right? And I've been practicing that for a long time. And so even if it's a new technology tomorrow, I'll learn that pick it up quite quickly. And that's how I've been, picking up all the technology over the years. So the last 25 years, I must have learned a lot of technologies. And I have no love for any of those technology because it's just a tool to get me to the other side, right? But if I were to look back, the major thing that I learned is that I only want to do things that are very scalable. Right.
Let's pause there. Let's pause there for a minute, Alvin. And it's really interesting because what I'm hearing from you there is that kind of attitude that you had at school, which was to pick things apart, be mischievous, see how far you could push things. Obviously, then stayed with you as you went into business because that's what you do on the internet, right? What if we could do this? What if we could do that? And what I find in a lot of founders who find scalable opportunities is there comes a point at some point in the journey as they grow the business through various rounds of investment. But actually then the team needs to be such a size that you're then leading it. You're not now necessarily managing the risk and the curiosity. So talk to us about maybe an inflection point there as you maybe grew that company or one of the others where you knew that you needed to lead and the challenges that came with that.
Now I use the voice over IP company that I've started. Now it went from like, 3 people, 3 founders, right? And became 500 people in about 3 years. So I have not worked in a big organization before. I have not managed anyone. And because I was so young, I've never managed anything more than 5 people. Yeah, I mean, I was in some leadership role when I was in school and so forth and community member of here and there, but I've never run a business before, right? So a lot of things that I do, right, is really common sense. And they are good and bad to it, right? But if I were to look back, I mean, there are lots. I mean, I learned a lot. If I could redo it again, I can probably 10x it. But at that time, a lot of them are just common sense, right? And what I did right was along the way, I just hired people. I just hired people who can do things that I can do, right? And that's how because managing 20 people and managing 50 people and 200 people, you need different skill set, right? Because you're not going to be able to reach out to 200 people, right? So delegation in how you manage people is very critical. And I started to bring in people to do it. But looking back, right, I should have done that earlier, right? Instead of holding it for several years before I started to hire very capable people, because thinking that I could do it. And then sometimes you get big headed, right? And I got big headed. I got big headed. And I mean, to look back, I went through times that I got very big headed and I screw up. And there are times that I just didn't listen. I stopped listening. And several screw up is because I stopped listening. I did well in those early days because I listened. But when you get big headed, you stop listening because you think you're almost near God's status, right? That you can do all things, right? And that's why you screw up several times. And I did screw up several times. Even running big companies, I actually, created new businesses and divisions that I didn't listen enough, that I actually lost a lot of money. And along the way, the one thing that I did right, that I should have done earlier was really, getting the right people to do the right job. And sometimes and when I look back, right, when you look at Google is one example that Larry and Sergey would get, Eric Smith to become, the one running the company, right? And sometimes we play a good role in creating that direction, that vision, and even creating the product. But we may not be the right person to run the company. That's why there's a role called CEO, CO, and so on, so forth. So I think recognizing what you're good at and focusing on what you're good at is key to your success. Instead of trying to think that I can run everything, you can't. And I think that's why I really screw up quite a bit. And I should have done it earlier. But that's why in that 10 years, right, there were times that I should have been able to speed up things a lot quicker, but I kind of wasted a lot of time along the way.
What I love about what you're saying, and we can talk about this with hindsight now, and you wouldn't have known this at the time, but when leaders, CEOs, founders of businesses that have grown recognize earlier than later that they are the problem, why their business is not necessarily being as effective as it could be, and we get out of our own way to let other people take the space, is the day that it's a eureka moment. And yet again, there's ego around and the way we've been brought up and all that kind of stuff, but it's fascinating. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So let's go into the second decade.
Right. Right.
And understand that sort of mid-decade of you maturing and having success and being able to grow the business with your partners. Just talk to us about that.
Well, voice over IP may be the one business I started. Then we got into e-commerce. So I attempted to build what Alibaba built in China. So I created my own version, but of course that version failed. Now, simply because there's no scale. Not that there's no scale. The scale for the Asian market at that time in the late 90s, way too small. You don't have that kind of manufacturing scale at China, right? So I did that, and I did not listen again. So not listening, I screw up, right? And I think one learning I always tell a lot of people is that I said, young entrepreneur a lot of time fail because they get placated and they don't listen. And the worst part is that not only that they don't listen, they just went all in. And it's only it's most of the time company fails because CEO don't listen enough and they went all in and they lose everything. And sometimes you can make small mistake, but those critical one will decide the fate of the company. And I've seen many companies fail because CEOs, the entire management just got too big headed and lose the entire company. So I've gone from creating that business similar to Alibaba that I failed, and I even started a company very similar to what Starlink is doing. Okay. This was in 2001, so it was satellite broadband. But the version that we had was like, we didn't have like rockets to the space. We didn't have low orbital satellite. At that time, it was really on C-band, a 2-meter dish. And the reason why we were using a 2-meter dish was because, it will be able to penetrate even when it's raining. But this is a solution. This was a solution that was really good for remote areas. So we were already doing that 20 years ago. And we did that. And I had the idea of, we can just bring the cost down and start, offering it to the retail. That will be huge market. But what is beyond the reach of the retail, because it's not cheap. The dish itself and the router and all that and the receiver, that's like $5,000, $5,000 to $6,000. And the service per month, we're talking about easily in the range of about $800 US per subscriber. So it was just way beyond. But my mind was, if you can do a low orbital using a KU band, smaller dish, that will be something. So I had that, yeah. But just again, timing is important. And also the readiness of the market and the readiness of devices. At that time, the devices were just not ready. So when I look at what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink, amazing. And being able to, satellite is probably one way that you can cover the entire Earth, right? And it's literally the notion of, information superhighway all over the world, right? And if you look at connectivity over fixed network, you're still fixed by distance, even 5G as well. But satellite is actually a very good solution. So we did that, and that became our second core business that we were offering that as well. So we brought in more investors. We even went public and so forth. So that was my entire journey, and the 1 decade of a lot of learning and a lot of screw up, really. And also, the big problem when you screw up, right, is having to deal with shareholders who are invested and so forth, and also learning how to cope with people, because as I've said, I don't have experience working in a big company, so a lot of things are learning, and I learned the hard way, right? And the hard way would be how to talk to people, how to manage people, how do you find the right people for the right job, and how to identify good people, right? And I screwed up many times because I didn't have the knowledge. So if I were to look back and say, if I had worked for a big company and knowing how big companies are run, that would have been very helpful. But again, I didn't have that luxury. So it was only later part of my life that I actually had the opportunity of working for big multinationals, and that changed my life, right? That you're given an opportunity to learn, how do you run a company with 200,000 people? How do you run a company like, scale up very quickly? There must be a process and system in place. For me, everything was just common sense, which was good when it was like 50 people.
Yeah.
But it's not working when it's 100 people and above. So when you're scaling up, find the right people to run it, and don't end up running something that you're not good at, right? And I should have done that long time.
So talk to us about that transition then of having grown the business, moving to those areas, and then deciding that you were going to go into that larger corporate environment. Just talk to us about that transition point and what happened around.
The transition for me was actually now one of the things that was hard for me was trying to. Now we talk about delegation a lot, right? But because I was so young, I was like shit. I was like in my like late 20s and all that, right? And then managing lots of people, and then not willing to delegate very much. I mean, I talk about delegation, but I end up not delegating. And I felt that I need to have a lot of control. I mean, just being immature, right? And but if I would look at look back, right, and say I should have like delegated and get people to do it, and that would have been so. At the end of the decade, right, I actually passed on a lot of that work to someone else already, and what I'm really good at, right? I think I'm good at product. I'm good at setting up direction, and I'm good at experimenting something, right? And if there was a person that I would look at myself, I think I'm like Sergey at Google. Now, if you look at Sergey, he has got nobody reporting to him. Larry does all the main job, but Sergey will be that one person that goes out and look at all that moonshot. I think I'm good at the job. I am very good if I were to have more hands off and focus on what I'm good at and building that. I would have built more businesses already. But instead, right, I was so hands on, that wanting to be in control. So the transition was actually very slow. And the way to scale up, right, is really putting the right people. And as for the founders, right, you should only focus on what you're good at. That's it, period. And leaving the rest of the work to your co-founders or even to the operational team.
Super. So talk to us about the last 10, 15 years, and then we'll move into what it is that's still out there for you. So as you've matured, like I've matured, what is it, the learning that you've gained, again, the challenges around that, around the leadership piece, and then we'll move on to what it is that you're doing now.
I mean, the last 15 years, I spent the last 15 years, right, in China. I actually moved to China in 2006. And I've been traveling to China in and out since 2001. What fascinated me was like, when I was looking at China, saying, 1.3 billion people, what can I do with it? I mean, I think that was probably that one thing that sticks to all the multinational 1.3 billion people. Imagine if they buy our toothpaste, imagine if they buy our chocolates and all that stuff. So, and I knew at that time that mobile is going to be very big. I'm not talking about mobile just calling. I'm talking about mobile internet. And when I saw that as an opportunity, because I knew at some point, right, the time spent on PC will eventually move to your mobile. And how do I know that? When I look at China, everyone has a phone, but no PC at home. So you knew, right? And when we had devices, there was like crappy 2.5G and the edge and all that stuff. But I mean, like in most technology, there's always a stepping point. And seeing that stepping point, I said, but the devices are just not ready. The Symbian, phone was crap. I actually worked for Nokia in 2007. And I had the opportunity because I was working in a division that was like literally looking at mobile internet services. And they had an entire strategy to build a company that is like Apple, except the only difference is that they didn't have a Steve Jobs, right? But they had a strategy that was really almost similar to Apple. I mean, Apple has Apple Store. They had downloads. Apple has got iTunes. They have got Nokia Music Stores. And Nokia has got like 40% market share at the time. So, but I also learned one thing. A lot of things I learned from Nokia. I mean, why they fail and all that. I mean, it's when you have a sizable company of that size trying to turn that shit. It's like a huge Titanic, right? You turn that shit, there were like 90 over divisions, and each of the division are run by like a head, right? And how do you get those head to work together? And they are all different stakeholder. The mapping head has its own interest. The music guy has his own interest. And I was in charge of the advertising business and trying to put the advertising together and get people to. It sounds ideal. Imagine being able to put advertising, all the assets, that'd be great, right? But just to get things rolling internally, it was next to impossible. And I knew at the time, right, it's going to be challenging, right? I didn't know they will feel that quickly, but I knew at that point it was difficult, really difficult. And you needed a person like Steve Jobs. It's like my way or the highway, right? And we didn't have that. It was like everything was just like you need to negotiate, explore, discuss, and then you're not gonna get things done. And I saw that as an opportunity, and I knew that. But I had no clue. Again, as I said, I have no clue how to get into the mobile internet business, which area. But because I was in advertising, I started my career in China in mobile advertising, and I knew that advertising is, if it's huge on PC, it's going to be a lot bigger on mobile. And the next 15 years, I mean, to cut the story short, right? I spent the next 15 years in digital advertising in China, from working at Nokia and then heading up mobile advertising at Google, and then running the media mobile advertising for Omnicom and also Interpublic Group. So I had the ability to look very far, and I actually went through the entire journey of seeing e-commerce, moving from almost nothing to the point of inflection, and again with mobile internet, again with mobile advertising, and so forth. So I've seen all that. So to me, I've seen the evolution of many technology, and of course, right now we have got Web3, we've got AI. Again, all these are at different era. You will see a new technology emerging, and of course, to me, I think AI is going to play a super game changing role in disrupting almost every category of business.
I agree. So then, final question for you, Alvin, just to sum up for us in terms of what it is that you're wanting to do for the next 10 years. Let's talk about that next decade. What is there still left for you to do as an individual? What is it you're still to give? And how does that relate to where you've come from?
I've been thinking of what I want to do, do for the next, I have thought about it when I was like 45 years old, asking myself, how much longer do I want to stay in business? What do I want to do? Because I can't keep on doing the same thing over and over again. But there's one thing that I really want to do is that I want to share. Now, the reason why I'm on this podcast and on several other podcasts is to be able to share, right? And again, I like the fact that this is like a confession, right? I've done a lot of podcasts that really focus on success more than anything else, but I want to talk about all the screw ups, right? And it's all this, and in fact, when I mentor a lot of startups, right, I always talk about where I screw up and where you will screw up, right? Potentially screw up. And the next 10 years, right, I want to be able to continue to share, whether that's going to be sharing knowledge or whether it's going to be sharing screw ups. And I think the one thing that I want to impart, right, is not just uh what's happening right now, but also knowledge and experience from the past. Mm, that's one thing I know very for certain. Business aside, being able to continue to invest into technology, that's ongoing. But really, what I'm really passionate about is to continue sharing. And I've done that, on social media, and the journey on social media has been going on for the last, I think, at least 12 years already, consistently for 12 years. And I'm still doing it. A lot of people say, "Don't you get tired?" I said, "How do you get tired when it's your hobby, right?" So I always believe that if you enjoy what you do, right, it becomes your hobby. And if it's a hobby, how do you get bored with your hobby, right? And I still enjoy it. Though my wife complains about it, "Oh, you spend so much time at your work that you spend so much time on social media that you have no time for me and the kids." And I think, yeah, I mean, to many to to a great extent, I actually spend too much time. So sometimes I have to remind myself, I have to cap myself at some point. But the one thing that won't change, right, is the our continuous learn. Learning to me, right, is really anti-aging. And one topic that I really enjoy learning out of technology is longevity science. I'm passionate about it. Whether I wind up investing in it, that's a different topic altogether. But this is one topic that that interests me the most, because I always wonder, as we age, right? I mean, health is one thing. To be able to live long, everyone wants to live long, but I want to be able to live long with good, with a good quality life. I don't want to be sick and die. Right? I want to be able to live long. So the whole concept of longevity is I've been researching on, and it's again the concept of learning and unlearn and relearn. Right. So something new for me, but I've learned quite a fair bit. I created a blog. I even created a lot of information around it, and I've been promoting it. That that we need to be more healthier, and what are the things that we should be avoiding. Food that would increase your cancer risk and so forth. Right? Biologically, we all of us can live beyond 100 years old. We're all centurion. It's what we consume. It's how we feed ourselves, right? That actually this allows us to actually to reach past a century. And that's one area that I'm actually actively embarking onto. But again, it's something very personal to me that I want to be able to learn as much as I can and share that information, not just within my network, but also on social media. So I've actually generated a blog on LinkedIn, and I've gone from like 0 follower to about 25,000 to 23,000 followers in a matter of like maybe 4 months. So it's something that I think I will continue doing, and I'm also exploring investing into longevity science.
Lovely. Well, I think that's a great place to finish with that kind of prospect of looking forward to living 100 years. And Alvin, it's been fantastic to hear your journey. Thanks for being so honest about the ups and the downs. And it's been fascinating to hear your journey today. And thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure. It's my pleasure to be able to share. Thanks a lot.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.